Countdown to possible shutdown. Government funding expires at midnight, but the Senate Majority Leader says they've reached an agreement with Republicans to avoid a shutdown. The debate around vaccination mandates continues, and amid that, YouTube has announced a new policy, expanding its ban on some videos and accounts that are critical of vaccines. And one country seems to be taking issue with it. And a global supply chain mess already impacting holiday shopping. This comes as Expedia has released its holiday travel forecast. Tune into Deep Dive as we explore these topics and more. Hello and welcome. This is Deep Dive and I'm Tiffany Meier. All eyes seem to be on the nation's capital and whether there will be a government shutdown. But before we get into that, a quick update on the border. The Department of Homeland Security says roughly 4,600 Haitians have been removed from the U.S. since September 19th. They were put on repatriation flights from Texas to Haiti. The expulsion comes after thousands of illegal immigrants, many of them Haitians, amassed under the Del Rio International Bridge this month. They arrived there and were waiting to get processed by U.S. immigration authorities. Many of them were thought to have been living in South America since Haiti's 2010 earthquake, but fled as jobs dried up in the region. The last remaining migrants left the temporary site on Friday. Some were flown back to Haiti, others moved to Customs and Border Protection processing centers, and several thousand were released into the U.S. Now let's turn to the nation's capital, where time is running out. Countdown to possible shutdown. Government funding expires tomorrow morning at 12:01 a.m., which is why this morning the Senate is scheduled to vote on a bill to keep the government funded through early December. It also includes emergency funding for natural disaster relief and to assist in Afghan refugee resettlement. Once the Senate acts, the House is expected to take up the measure. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer announced Democrats have reached an agreement with Republicans to keep the federal government funded. He spoke from the Senate floor late Wednesday.
We have an agreement on the CR, the continuing resolution to prevent a government shutdown, and we should be voting on that tomorrow morning.
Schumer said the Senate will hold several amendment votes before voting on the continuing resolution. The House is expected to take up the measure after the Senate. Funding for the federal government expires at midnight, but Democratic leaders have projected confidence there will not be a shutdown. But avoiding a government shutdown before Friday isn't the only thing on lawmakers' to-do list. They also need to lift the debt ceiling before the middle of October.
On this vote, the yeas are 219, the nays are 212. The bill is passed without objection. A motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
And with that announcement, the U.S. debt ceiling is suspended. There was a slight tinge of bipartisanship in the final tally. Democratic Representatives Kurt Schrader of Oregon and Jared Golden of Maine voted with Republicans against the bill, while GOP Representative Adam Kinzinger was the sole member of his party to side with the Democrats. The bill now goes to the Senate, where it is expected to fail. Thursday is the deadline for Congress to reach an agreement in order to avoid a government shutdown. And also on the to-do list, coming to a compromise on a budget reconciliation package is still a work in progress, and the House is scheduled to vote on a bipartisan infrastructure bill today. Senator Joe Manchin speaking to reporters outside the Capitol.
My top line has been 1.5 because I believe in my heart that what we can do and what the needs we have right now and what we can afford to do without basically changing our whole society to an entitlement mentality.
Late on Wednesday, Manchin called Democrats' $3.5 trillion spending bill a, quote, fiscal insanity. His statement reads, "I cannot and will not support trillions in spending or an all-or-nothing approach that ignores the brutal fiscal reality our nation faces." And speaking of spending, there are calls to start holiday shopping now. A shipping crisis is making many items on your holiday list a bit more difficult to find and more expensive. And now one major retailer is taking matters into its own hands to make sure there's enough inventory to meet demand. A global supply chain mess already impacting holiday shopping, labor shortages, scarce and expensive shipping containers, and an ongoing computer chip crisis, all leading to costly price tags and fewer options.
It's a huge problem. Companies have been able to keep up, but it'll be more of what we're seeing, essentially higher prices.
Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo admitting computer chip shortages will likely lead to price increases for some of the items on holiday lists. Meanwhile, shipping issues are so severe that some big retailers are taking drastic measures to make sure there's enough supply to meet the demand this Christmas. Costco is chartering ships and renting containers to transport inventory between Asia, the U.S., and Canada. The move comes as Costco deals with major delays in toys, computers, tablets, and video games.
I think we're going to be struggling with it well into next year until we can really smooth out some of these bottlenecks.
Meanwhile, top toy makers say their products will be harder to find and more expensive this holiday season, blaming higher shipping costs that typically get passed down to consumers.
We do see inflationary pressure in freight cost, ocean freight cost, and material. So we have to address that.
And it's also Christmas trees and decorations that will be more expensive. Some large sellers of artificial trees say they are already increasing their prices by double-digit percentages. Shipping containers have become incredibly scarce and extremely expensive. 1 year ago, companies would pay around $1,900 to book a 40-foot steel container on a standard route between China and Europe. Now, some companies are spending more than $14,000. That's according to data from Drury, a maritime research consultancy. And now let's turn to the latest controversy, debates over the vaccine mandate. The White House said yesterday that it's not clear when the new rule requiring tens of millions of private sector workers to get the vaccine will go into effect.
Maybe we should have been more specific at the time. Obviously, it takes some time, and we want to make sure when we put these out, they're clear and they provide guidance necessary to businesses.
The Occupational Health and Safety Administration, or OSHA, will require more than 80 million private sector workers to get the vaccine. OSHA is responsible for protecting workers from hazards, and since the virus is considered a hazard, employers could be fined for not complying. Employers could be fined over $13,000. This comes as almost 200 Minnesota healthcare workers have filed a lawsuit to get their employers to drop the vaccine mandate. Unnamed health workers in various hospitals across the state brought on the lawsuit. The lawsuit alleges the employers are putting a burden on their employees by not allowing them to claim religious exemptions to the vaccine. It's against about 24 healthcare institutions, hospitals, and federal officials. These defendants didn't immediately respond to a request for comment. But one of them, Fairview Health System, said earlier this month they support Biden's executive order. And it said evidence shows vaccines are safe and reduce the chance of spreading disease, hospitalization, severe illness, and death. And let's turn from the healthcare sector to the skies. United Airlines is set to terminate nearly 600 employees who don't want to get vaccinated. United was the first U.S. airline to issue a mandate. United says more than 99% of domestic employees chose to get vaccinated, not including those who asked for an exception. Despite the layoffs, it plans to hire about 25,000 people over the next few years. But you have to be vaccinated. Students at United's pilot training school will also need to be jabbed. The CEO touting the vaccine.
I hate that anyone chose to leave. But more importantly, I know that there are United Airlines employees who got vaccinated because of this, who will be alive a year from now, who would not be had we not done this. And that means a lot more to me, that those people are going to be alive. And some of them might still be mad they had to get vaccinated, but they're going to be alive. And that means far more to me than the small minority, the fewer than 1% that chose to leave the company.
A Gartner poll says 46% of companies plan to issue vaccine mandates. And on the vaccine front, YouTube is adopting a new policy, expanding its ban on some videos and accounts that are critical of vaccines. YouTube announced in a statement on Wednesday they are expanding their medical misinformation policies. They don't allow videos that claim vaccines cause chronic side effects, do not produce disease transmission, or contain substances not on the ingredient list. Here are some examples.
We don't allow claims that vaccines cause autism, are part of a depopulation agenda, cause chronic health effects such as infertility or cancer, do not reduce the risk of contracting illness, contain substances that are not on the vaccine ingredient list, such as biological matter from fetuses, contain substances such as microchips meant to track or identify those who've received them, or claims that vaccines alter a person's genetic makeup.
The policy is already in effect. It applies to all vaccines approved by health authorities and the World Health Organization, not just COVID-19 vaccines. YouTube says since last year, they've removed over 130,000 videos for violating their COVID-19 vaccine policies. The company calls them harmful vaccine content.
Health authorities like the World Health Organization have given clear medical guidance on the safety, efficacy, and ingredients of approved vaccines.
YouTube will allow videos about vaccine policies, new vaccine trials, historical vaccine successes or failures, and personal testimonials, but they cannot show a pattern of promoting vaccine hesitancy. If you violate this policy for the first time, you will get a warning and then a strike the next one. And if you get 3 strikes in 90 days, YouTube will terminate your channel. And it seems one country is taking issue with the new policy. Russia is threatening to retaliate against both YouTube and Germany. That's after YouTube shut down 2 German-language channels from Russian state broadcaster RT. YouTube had already issued strikes and suspended the channel from uploading new videos for a week. An RT reporter explained the video talked about the government's approach to the pandemic. Now, Russia's communications regulator says it will block access to YouTube if the tech giant doesn't restore the videos. And the Russian Foreign Ministry calls the measure unjust. They allege that YouTube collaborated with the German government, a charge Germany denies. The Russian foreign minister also says retaliatory measures are not only appropriate, but also necessary. And RT calls this ban an act of media war by Germany. The outlet's editor-in-chief promises to ban German media operating in Russia. One of the channels, RT Deutsch, had over 600,000 followers and operated primarily in Germany. After YouTube temporarily suspended the channel, RT used another channel to upload videos. YouTube then banned both of them for violating community guidelines. And now, before we end, holidays are coming up and Expedia has released its holiday travel forecast. According to the travel website, popular destinations this year include beaches in Mexico and the mountains in Utah and Colorado. Some places seeing the biggest jump in searches are St. Croix, Virgin Islands, Salt Lake City, Gainesville, Florida, Allentown, Pennsylvania, and Estes Park, Colorado. Expedia says flexibility is key when it comes to holiday travel. They say avoid flying on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, December 23rd, and December 28th, because they are often the busiest and most expensive dates. But what do you think? Let me know below. Thanks for tuning in to Deep Dive. I'm Tiffany Meier, and see you soon.